1. A weird night in Willowbrook. Willowbrook usually got quiet after dark. But tonight, a restless breeze blew through the empty streets, rattling loose shutters and sending dry leaves skittering across the cobblestones. Labubu, the naughty little creature with tufted ears and a smile that was too big for its little face, walked along the moonlit alleyway. The cracked bricks were covered in shadows that looked like thin fingers. The night smelled like wet dirt and smoke that was so faint it sounded like campfires far away. Labubu loved nights like this, quiet enough to hear its own heartbeat, but full of hidden potential. A soft chirping could be heard in the distance, as if the night itself was singing a lullaby. 2. A soft cry, then there was a noise that didn't fit. Chirp, chirp. It was higher, sharper, and had a shaky sound. Labubu's long ears moved. The noise made the creature go to a forgotten courtyard behind an old bakery. The moonlight made broken crates and stones covered in moss look like they were made of silver. There was a small, shiny egg in the middle of the courtyard that looked like a broken teacup. A little dragon, no bigger than a kitten, shook next to it. The moonlight made the emerald green scales shine, and a pair of soft, see-through wings shook against its back. Labubu squatted down with his eyes wide open. It whispered with a laugh, "Well, you are not a pigeon." The baby dragon's big amber eyes blinked, and it let out a squeaky growl that sounded more like a hiccup. 3. A weakling Labubu moved closer, holding up its hands to show it meant no harm. The baby dragon sniffed the air and moved forward on shaky legs. Labubu's fingers brushed against warm breath that had a faint smoky smell. "Aren't you a spark of wonder?" Labubu said softly. The dragon rubbed its nose against Labubu's hand. When Labubu touched it, a faint green light pulsed from its tiny chest. For a moment, Labubu felt a strange warmth bloom in its own heart, as if it were a quiet promise. A distant bark broke the fragile moment behind them. 4. The barking threat, it wasn't the lazy woof of a pet that was sleepy. This bark was loud and sharp, and it kept going. Then one more, and one more. Labubu got stiff. The baby dragon squeaked and fell back, flapping its wings in fear. A pair of glowing yellow eyes came out of the alley's dark mouth, followed by a low growl that sounded like a storm rolling in. A big, scruffy dog came out. Its fur was a mix of brown and black, and its teeth sparkled in the moonlight. The smile on Labubu's face went away. "That's not very helpful." The dog barked again, and the sound bounced off the stone walls. It moved forward in a threatening way. 5. Quick thinking, Labubu picked up the baby dragon and held it in its arms. The little thing held onto Labubu's chest, and its tiny claws poked through the fabric of his tunic. The dragon's body gave off heat, a faint warmth that smelled like burnt pine. The dog jumped. Labubu ran sideways, with his feet barely touching the ground. The alley turned into a maze of narrow paths and broken fences. Claws scraped against the cobblestones behind them. "Hold on tight, Spark," Labubu said, naming the dragon without thinking. "We're going for a run." 6. Flight on the roof. A pile of old crates leaned against a wall that was falling apart. Labubu ran and jumped, holding onto the wood with its claws. It jumped onto the roof in one leap and pulled itself up with surprising strength. The dog barked angrily as it skidded to a stop below. It jumped at the wall, snapping its jaws, but it couldn't quite reach. Its eyes were full of anger. Labubu crouched on the roof to catch its breath. The baby dragon shook but raised its head. Little sparks fizzled at the edges of its mouth. "Oh, be careful," Labubu said softly. "You'll set my fur on fire." The dragon squeaked an apology and put its head under Labubu's chin. 7. A chase without sound. Labubu moved from roof to roof like a shadow, with its tail flicking to keep its balance. The dog walked round the alleys with its nose to the ground. The barks got quieter as it got farther away, but the threat was still there. The baby dragon's eyes started to close as it relaxed. A soft purr shook Labubu's chest. A thin wisp of smoke curled into the night air every time the creature exhaled. Labubu felt a strange urge to protect someone, something it didn't often feel. Mischief was fun, but this was something else. Secret place finally. Labubu got to an old clock tower on the edge of town. The big wooden door at the bottom was crooked and hung on rusty hinges. Inside, gears that had been there for a long time were quiet and covered in dust. Labubu squeezed through a hole and climbed the stairs that twisted and turned until they got to the top. The moon shone through a window that was broken, making the old floorboards look pale. Labubu said, "This will do," and sat down on a beam. The dragon, Spark, snuggled up closer and closed its eyes. Labubu looked out at the still town. The dog's last bark faded into silence somewhere below. The only sound in the air for a long time was Spark's soft breathing. 9. A flash of magic as sleep was about to take them both down. Spark's chest started to glow again, this time even more brightly. Little bits of green light floated up and swirled round like fireflies. They hovered for a moment before spiraling toward the window that was lit by the moon and out into the night. Labubu turned its head. "What's that all about?" The glow pulsed once, then twice, and then the baby dragon opened its eyes. They were now shining like two embers. A voice that wasn't quite a voice or a thought echoed in Labubu's head. "Find the Heartstone." Labubu blinked and his ears twitched. "Sorry," but the dragon had already gone back to sleep, leaving the soft whisper in the moonlight. Labubu woke up to the soft weight of the baby dragon still curled up against its chest. The cool morning air that came in through the broken clock tower window smelled faintly of smoke. Sunlight shone through the dusty floorboards, making tiny specks of dust float like slow sparks. Labubu had decided to call the dragon Spark. It stretched its delicate wings and let out a small, squeaky yawn that came with a puff of grey smoke that didn't hurt anyone. "Morning." "Ember breath," Labubu said softly, rubbing its own eyes with a clawed hand. The memory of the whisper from the night before came back to life. "Find the Heartstone." It wasn't a dream. The words were warm and clear in a way that no dream could be. With wide amber eyes, Spark looked up at Labubu as if he were waiting for an explanation for their strange connection. "Do you know what a Heartstone is?" "What is it?" Labubu asked. The small dragon tilted its head and made a soft trill, which was neither a yes nor a no. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer in the distance rang through Willowbrook, reminding everyone that the town was already awake and busy. Labubu moved round uncomfortably. It wasn't normal for it to stay hidden all day in a creaking tower. Usually, it would be out playing harmless tricks and gathering shiny trinkets from merchants who didn't know what was going on. But now there was Spark, and there was that voice. They needed to know. And breakfast. Labubu crept down the spiral staircase with Spark carefully perched on its shoulder and peeked through the cracked door. There were a lot of people in the alley outside who were going to the market early. Their baskets were full of bread and pastries that were still warm from the oven. The smell of baked apples and honey wafted up, making Labubu's stomach growl. Spark flicked its little tongue, which was clearly smelling it too. "Okay," Labubu said quietly. "Look normal is the first rule of stealth." It fixed the torn scarf round its neck. But there was nothing normal about a creature with long ears and yellow eyes that looked like it was up to no good walking through a human market with a baby doctor. Agon, but Labubu had a talent for blending in with the edges of attention. They blended in with the crowd, moving with the traders and travelers. Spark was mostly hidden by the scarf, but sometimes little bits of green smoke would leak out of the fabric. Some people passing by wrinkled their noses, But no one looked closely enough to ask. The bakery they got to was full of warm air and the smell of rising dough. Labubu traded 3 shiny buttons and a bent copper coin for a small loaf of bread and a piece of soft cheese. Labubu broke the bread in half and gave a piece to Spark while sitting on a stone wall in the sun. The dragon sniffed it suspiciously, then quickly ate it up, sending crumbs flying down its tiny chest. With a smile, Labubu said, "You agree? Good. That's all I can afford right now, until I borrow something better." While they were eating, Labubu's mind started to hum softly. It didn't sound like a bell ringing. It sounded more like a bell vibrating in the distance. The strange rhythm made Spark's eyes glow faintly all of a sudden. The whisper came back, and this time it was clearer. "On the south side of the river. The Heartstone is waiting." Labubu became tense. "Okay," it said in a soft voice. "That's south of the river. I just hope there aren't any more dogs guarding it." The way to the river went through the oldest part of Willowbrook, where weeds grew in cracks in the cobblestones and things that had been left behind. The hum got louder as they walked, pulling them like a quiet magnet. Every now and then, Spark would flap its wings, sending out small bursts of heat that warmed the cool morning air around them. The remains of an old stone bridge stood near the riverbank. The middle of the bridge had long since fallen into the rushing water below. Moss grew on the arches, and wildflowers grew between the stones in a show of strength. The whispering hum grew louder until it shook Labubu's teeth. Spark jumped off its shoulder and awkwardly glided to the edge of the bridge that was still there. "Be careful," Labubu said as he ran after them. Spark made a noise and started to smell round a group of rocks at the bottom of an old carved pillar. The pillar was half eroded, but when the sun hit it, faint runes shone through. Labubu used a claw to brush away some moss and draw the symbols. The stone shook under their feet all of a sudden. A vertical seam of light split the pillar, making it look like a door. It came from inside and looked like living flame, green and gold. Spark made a happy trill and jumped right in. "Hold on for me," Labubu yelled as he squeezed through the small opening. The inside led to a secret room under the bridge, an old cave that had been smoothed out by hands that were no longer there. Stalactites hung like frozen fangs, and they dripped steadily into a shallow pool that glowed in a strange way. In the middle of the pool was a crystal the size of a melon that glowed steadily. It looked like it was alive, breathing in time with the sound in Labubu's head. Spark flew up to the crystal, his wings shaking. The light got stronger, making the dragon's scales shine in a bright green color. Labubu moved closer and felt the energy in the air. Finally, the whisper turned into a deep, resonant voice. "Guardian chosen, bondmaid. Keep the flame of new things safe." Labubu blinked and his ears twitched. "Guardian, me?" Spark pressed its tiny forehead against the Heartstone before it could protest. A wave of light shot out, making the cave shine with blinding brightness. Labubu covered its eyes, but it felt warm all over. And there was something deeper, a connection between it and the baby dragon and the pulsing crystal. Behind its closed eyes, pictures flashed, a mountain surrounded by storm clouds, a circle of old trees, and a dark shadow moving like smoke across the sky. There was a sense of urgency in the visions, along with one clear truth. Something bad was coming, and Spark was at the center of a dot as the light faded. Spark grew taller and his eyes glowed steadily. There were tiny sparks dancing along the edges of its wings, and a faint trail of green fire lit the floor of the cave before turning into smoke. The Heartstone got a little less bright, as if it had finished its job. Labubu squatted down next to the dragon. "So, you're a chosen flame, and I'm supposed to protect you. I was hoping for a quiet morning of stealing pastries." Spark made a proud trail and pushed Labubu's hand. Even though it was sarcastic, the creature's heart raced with fear and determination. The stone pillar behind them groaned, making a low rumble that shook the dust off the cave ceiling. Labubu looked up quickly. There was a noise of claws scraping coming from the door. Not the dog from last night. These were heavier, sharper, and echoed like steel against stone. A spark hissed, which was strange for something so small, and a little flame flickered on its tongue. Labubu picked up the dragon and backed up toward the Heartstone. Looking round in the dark, two eyes appeared at the door, glowing a sickly orange. There were two more pairs, then a third. Well, Labubu grumbled, tightening its grip on Spark. So much for a peaceful treasure hunt, 3 thin. Low creatures with fur like burnt ash and teeth that shone like wet bone came out of the darkness. They moved without making a sound, their eyes fixed on the glowing dragon. The Heartstone's hum got faster, like a heart beating to fast. Labubu held Spark in her arms, and its small body shook. The green fire at its throat got brighter. Calm down, Spark. Labubu said softly, I've got you. We probably have this. The first creature crouched down, its muscles tensing. Labubu could almost feel the tension in the air. Just before the storm hits, Labubu jumped to the side without thinking as the creature lunged, its claws cutting through the space where they had been standing. When its claws hit the ground, sparks flew. Labubu landed badly, sliding across the slippery stone, but still holding onto the dragon. Spark turned just enough to open its mouth. A thin jet of green flame shot out and hit the second creature in the face. The animal cried out in pain and fell back, its fur smoking from the burns. Labubu blinked in amazement. Don't let me ever underestimate you. But there wasn't time to admire. The third creature went round in circles, its eyes getting brighter. Labubu felt the Heartstone's energy surge again. A silent command to protect. Get away. Right. Labubu said out loud. Then, an exit plan. It saw a narrow crack near the back of the cave that was just big enough for its thin body. Holding Spark tightly, it ran toward the crack with its heart racing. The creatures howled, which sounded like metal grinding, and chased after them. Labubu squeezed through the crack, scraping fur and fabric as Spark held on tight. Behind them, claws hit stone, and the echoes chased them into the dark. The passage turned down, then up, and finally a faint glimmer of daylight appeared ahead. Labubu lunged for it and burst out onto a hilltop that looked down on the roaring river. It felt like freedom when cool air hit its face. Spark fell to the ground with eyes that shone with pride and defiance. They all watched the entrance to the cave behind them fell apart with a loud crash, sealing whatever those creatures were back in the depths. Labubu took a shaky breath and looked at the little dragon, which tilted its head and made a soft trill. Yeah, Labubu said, and a smile spread across its face even though it was in danger. That was not at all what I had in mind for today. The whisper came back one last time, this time softer but still clear. The journey has begun. Labubu looked at the far-off mountains, where storm clouds were gathering like a quiet army. It pulled the scarf tight around its neck and picked up Spark. Looks like we have a long way to go, partner, it said as it stepped into the wind. Labubu and Spark followed a narrow path that wound through the hills beyond Willowbrook. The wind brought a damp chill. The tall grass was lit up by the afternoon sun in changing bands, and clouds slowly gathered in a grey spiral over the mountains in the distance. Labubu watched those clouds with caution. They seemed to breathe like something alive, and the low rumble of thunder that could be felt but not heard was scary. Now, Spark could walk next to Labubu without having to be carried every step. The baby dragon's wings had gotten stronger overnight. Each little jump made it glide a few feet before landing with a soft thump. Every now and then, a faint ember would escape its mouth. leaving a trail of glowing flecks that floated like fireflies in the afternoon haze. Labubu said, "You're growing too fast," with a mix of humor and worry. "At this rate, you will be burning down whole bakeries by next week." A sound of pride came from Spark's chirp. It ran ahead to catch a gust of falling leaves, then came back to nuzzle Labubu's ankle. Labubu's heart felt like it was being pulled by an invisible thread whenever Spark looked up at him with those amber eyes. They drank from a small stream along the way. The water was freezing and rushing down the mountain slopes, which got closer and closer with each hour. As Labubu cupped its hands, the whisper came back, this time softer but still clear. "Follow the storm. The ridge of echoes is where the Heartstone's path goes." Labubu let out a slow breath. "Ridge of echoes?" it mumbled. "Sounds nice." Spark tilted its head as if it were listening to the same voice. Then it made a strong trill. There was no going back. As night fell, the path got narrower and wound between steep cliffs where the sun rarely shone. The shadows grew darker, and the air got cooler until Labubu could see its breath. The silence was thick, and the only sounds were the crunch of their footsteps and the soft rustle of wings when Spark jumped to a higher rock. Then a smell came, sharp and metallic, like iron and rain. Labubu stopped moving. Spark also stopped, his nostrils flaring and his eyes bright with sudden alertness. A slow, deliberate scraping sound came from the dark crack in front of us. A person appeared, covered in a patchwork of torn leather. The hood covered its face, but its eyes shone faintly in the dark, reflecting the last bits of light. "Well now," a voice with a rough edge said, "a Labubu far away from where it causes trouble, and is that a baby dragon?" Labubu stepped in front of Spark without thinking. "Depends on who is asking," it said, forcing a smile that felt fake. The figure turned its head. "Names don't matter. I keep an eye on the storms, and I've been waiting for the guardian." That word guardian made Labubu's chest feel tight. "Not sure you've got the right creature," it said, but the stranger just laughed. "You have the Heartstone's mark. I can sense it in the air. The storm you want will put you to the test. The shadow is already hunting." The figure's eyes moved to the sky, which was getting darker. "You have to get to the ridge before the moon rises tomorrow, or the echoes will never speak again." Before Labubu could ask what that meant, the stranger turned round and disappeared into the rocks, leaving only the sound of the wind behind. Labubu rubbed its ears, which made it feel uneasy. It said, "People really need to stop showing up out of nowhere." Spark made a questioning chirp, but Labubu shook its head. "Let's keep going, before we get more strange prophecies thrown at us." The night came quickly. They found a small hole under a rock that was hanging over and made a small fire out of dry twigs. Spark curled up close to the flames, making its own soft heat until the fire's edges glowed green. Labubu chewed on the last piece of bread from the morning while looking at the storm front in the distance. The clouds above the mountains flashed with silent lightning, a strange green-white that reminded me of the Heartstone's memory. Sleep came and went. Labubu dreamed of black smoke that twisted round and a low, rumbling growl that sounded like it came from the ground itself. It woke up before dawn to find Spark already awake, staring at the mountains with its wings shaking with excitement. They left with a pale sky above them. The path got steeper and turned into loose shale that made noise when you walked on it. The cold wind howled through narrow passes, bringing echoes from far away that sounded like ghostly voices rising and falling. The noise made Labubu's teeth hurt. By noon, they had made it to a flat area surrounded by tall stone spires. There was a hole near the top of each spire that made natural horns that sang when the wind hit them. The air was full of an eerie harmony, low, haunting notes that rolled across the plateau in waves that never stopped. Labubu said softly, "The Ridge of Echoes." The name was just right. As the music of the stones surrounded them, Spark climbed onto a boulder with wide eyes. The whisper in Labubu's head matched the sound. "Put the bond on the wind. Wake up the way." Labubu looked round, not sure what to do. "Put the bond? I don't really have any instructions for that." Spark jumped down and walked toward the tallest spire, its wings shaking with a light of their own. As it carefully touched the stone with its claw, emerald sparks danced along its tail. As soon as contact was made, the whole ridge responded. A deep chord thumped through the ground and shook Labubu's feet. The other spires joined in, and their notes made a strong melody that filled the plateau. A strong wind blew up in a spiral column round the central spire, picking up loose pebbles and dust and sending them into a glowing vortex. Spark let out a loud scream, and emerald fire burst from its tiny body, shooting up into the air to join the spinning wind. Labubu covered its eyes and felt its heart race as the beam of light reached up to the storm clouds above. There was a roar from inside the storm. It wasn't thunder. It was something alive. The clouds twisted and turned, and dark shapes came together to make a huge shadow. Two bright orange eyes opened in the swirling darkness and focused on the glowing spire. Labubu's breath stopped. The shadow they had seen in the Heartstone's vision was real, and it was moving quickly. The wind screamed louder, sending the shadows roar across the ridge. The stone shook. The fire in Spark's eyes burned brighter, but the little dragon's body shook with effort. Labubu ran up to Spark and wrapped its arms round him. It was very hot, but it stayed tight. "You aren't doing this by yourself," Labubu yelled over the wind. "We'll do it together if we have to wake something up." The Heartstone's unseen hum grew stronger in both of them. Labubu felt a rush of energy fill its veins, a warmth that mixed with Spark's fire until they were one flame and one pulse. They raised their voices together. Labubu's was wild and Spark's was high and fierce into the howling wind. The spire was lit up with green light. A shockwave spread out, knocking Labubu to its knees. The sky broke with a loud crack, and the dark shape above screamed in rage. Lightning of pure green shot out of the spire and speared upward, hitting the shadow right between its burning eyes. The creature roared, and it sounded like stone breaking and worlds falling apart. The storm twisted and turned violently before starting to break up. The darkness faded until only scraps of cloud were left against the pale evening sky. When the last sound died down, the ridge was quiet. The wind calmed down and became a soft breeze. Spark leaned against Labubu's chest, tired but glowing with a calm inner light. Labubu held the dragon close and felt its tiny heart beating steadily against his own. The clouds parted high above to show a full moon that was silver and calm. The whisper came back one last time, soft like a lullaby. "The first trial is over. Guardian and Flame are tied together. The path goes on past the horizon." Labubu let out a slow breath, and his ears twitched at the quiet. "First trial," it said in a low voice. "That means there's a second. Numbers." Spark made a soft trill, and its eyelids drooped, but a small smile curled up in its muzzle. Labubu laughed, which sounded like relief and a new sense of purpose. They stayed on the ridge until the moonlight turned the stone silver. The valley below was calm, and the river sparkled like a glass ribbon. Labubu felt a strange sense of belonging and purpose for the first time since they met. Labubu whispered to the sleeping dragon, "I guess we're really in this together. Guardian and Flame. Let's find out what the next horizon holds for us." Labubu held Spark close and looked out at the dark hills that seemed to go on forever, and the stars that were far away. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by the Heartstone and the journey that had just begun. As dawn broke over the horizon, moonlight stayed on the ridge of echoes. Labubu stretched out its stiff limbs, being careful not to wake Spark, who was curled up under its arm like a living ember. Each time the baby dragon breathed out, It made warm clouds in the cool morning air. The clouds glowed a faint green color. Labubu looked to the east, where the sky was pink and gold. The Heartstone's whisper had stopped after the trial that night, but Labubu's chest still felt like it was vibrating. It felt like a drumbeat that kept pushing them forward. "First trial complete," Labubu said quietly, remembering the voice. "That means the second one is already waiting." Spark stirred and opened his eyes with a sleepy trill. Its small wings bent and shook, as if they could already feel the day's challenge. "Are you ready?" Labubu asked, running his fingers through the fur on top of Spark's head. "Because I'm starting to think we won't have coffee breaks on this trip." Spark let out a determined chirp and jumped out of Labubu's arms, landing gracefully on a stone nearby. The little dragon moved with more strength and confidence after the storm last night. They started down the ridge, where the path turned toward a valley covered in silver mist. The view from above was endless. Dark forests that looked like sleeping giants, rivers that sparkled like quicksilver in the rising sun, and a jagged line of distant peaks with white crowns on top. As they went down, the wind carried faint sounds, like low notes from a flute that were both haunting and sweet. Labubu's ears moved. "Do you hear that?" Spark turned its head to listen. The melody floated through the trees like an invitation. The path ended at a small stone bridge that crossed a deep gorge. Mist curled up, covering the bottom with moving veils. There was a tall person on the other side wearing a cloak of mossy green. Their face was hidden, but the flute they were holding shone with a strange light. Labubu moved carefully. "Let me guess. You've been waiting for us." The figure put down the flute. Their voice was neither male nor female, but it was calm like water flowing. They said, "The Guardian and the Flame. You've woken up the first song. You have to cross the hollow veil to get to the right path." Labubu looked at the bridge. The stones looked old and worn, and the mist below moved round like a living thing. "And what if we don't?" "The veil will swallow the world's music," the figure said. "Everyone will be quiet." Spark jumped forward, his eyes full of determination. Labubu let out a sigh. "Figures, okay. Do you have any advice? Do we just cross?" The person raised the flute again and played a short, sweet tune. "Let the bond lead you. Don't believe what the veil says." Before Labubu could ask what that meant, the figure disappeared into the fog like a note that was fading away. Labubu rubbed its head. Why does everyone we meet have trouble following clear directions? But they still went onto the bridge. The stones were slippery under their feet, and the mist rose higher with each step. The air got heavy and cold halfway through. Then the whispers started. At first, they were soft and far away, like echoes of dreams. "Turn back. You aren't enough. The flame will let you down." Labubu's jaw was tight. "Don't pay attention to it," they said. But the voices got louder and clearer. "You didn't do well before. You will fail again. The dragon will set you on fire." The Heartstone was not honest. Spark hesitated, her wings twitching with anger. A weak green flame flickered in and out of its mouth. Labubu knelt down and looked into Spark's scared eyes. "Hey, they're just words, not true." The mist got thicker, and strange shapes started to appear, dark shadows of creatures Labubu barely knew, old foes from childhood pranks that went wrong and friends' faces that had been hurt by mischief. Each figure whispered accusations, their eyes glowed like dying embers. Labubu's chest got tight, and wanted memories of careless jokes, broken promises, and selfish fun came to mind. The voices might have been right. It's possible that Labubu wasn't really a guardian at all, but a trickster who got caught up in a quest that was meant for someone better. Spark whined softly and pushed against Labubu's side. Its small body gave off heat, and its heartbeat was steady against the cold. Labubu took a deep breath. They said out loud, "No, I'm not perfect, but I'm here. And we're all in this together." They held Spark's paw in their own and walked forward. The shapes of the silhouettes changed and hissed. "We're ill," Labubu said over and over again. "We are enough. The bond is stronger than the lie." A faint green light began to glow under their feet, leaving a trail of light behind them as they walked. The whispers got louder and louder until they broke like glass when they got to the other side. The fog suddenly got thinner. Sunlight spilled over a field full of wildflowers, making them look bright and impossible to miss. The birds sang a happy song. Labubu let out a sigh of relief, his heart racing. "That was kind of scary," they said. Spark chirped and let out a burst of flame that was full of victory. A soft laugh floated through the air. The flute player stood at the edge of the meadow, looking more solid now, with dew on their mossy cloak. "You have crossed the hollow vale," they said. "The second song is yours." Labubu turned their head. "Second song. Are we putting together an album here?" The eyes of the figure sparkled like clear water. "Every song makes the bond stronger. The Heartstone will only fully awaken when all three resonate. Your last stop is to the west, where the Ember Caverns breathe." "Of course it does," Labubu said quietly. "Ember Caverns is a name that makes you think of an easy trip." The figure smiled a little. "Keep in mind that the third song needs more than just courage. It also needs trust beyond fear." The figure disappeared again into the morning light before Labubu could say anything. All that was left was a faint melody that hung in the air like the smell of rain. They took a break in the meadow and shared some bread and berries they had picked along the way. Spark jumped from flower to flower, and its scales showed every color of the petals. Labubu lay back in the grass and let the sun's warmth soak into his tired muscles. Even though it was beautiful, there was a new tension in the air. The Heartstone's pulse sped up, reminding them that the journey was far from over. They set out again in the afternoon, this time heading west. The land changed slowly. Gentle hills turned into rocky slopes, and the wind carried a faint smell of sulfur. The sky turned a deep copper color by the time the sun went down. In front of them, a line of dark cliffs rose up, and the jagged tops were lit from below by a pulsing orange light. Flames shot up from time to time, lighting up the clouds in violent flashes. Labubu whispered, "The Ember Caverns." Spark's eyes shone with excitement and a little bit of fear. They set up camp at the bottom of the cliffs, where the ground was warm. The ground seemed to breathe, letting out hot air in bursts. A deep, resonant rumble could be heard in the distance, like the heartbeat of a giant sleeping. Labubu gave Spark some dried fruit to eat and then stared at the fire. "One more try," they said softly. "We'll face whatever's in there together." Spark pressed close, wrapping her wings round Labubu in a soft hug. The little dragon's warmth made the cold of doubt go away. Stars came out above them, sharp and bright against the dark sky. The moon rose and lit up the volcanic landscape with silver light. The Heartstone's hum matched the rumble of the earth, making it sound like two heartbeats were coming together in a steady call. Labubu felt a rush of determination. The trip was changing both of them, turning trouble into purpose, fear into strength, and friendship into something deeper, almost holy. Labubu whispered, "Guardian and Flame," which was both a promise and a challenge. "Let's finish the song," Spark answered with a soft trill, and his eyes shone with the light from the Ember Caverns, where the last test awaited. The night air throbbed with a low, molten heartbeat. Labubu woke up before dawn, and the quiet rumble of the earth echoed through its bones. Spark was already awake and sitting up straight at the entrance to the small shelter they had made out of stones and dry brush. The baby dragon's scales glowed a soft orange, as if the sun was hiding inside its chest. "Couldn't sleep either." "How?" Labubu asked, stretching out her sore arms and legs. Spark turned, and his eyes glowed like embers. The little dragon made a sharp trill and pointed its nose at the cliff, where the heat shimmered in waves that didn't stop moving. Labubu looked where it was looking. The Ember Caverns looked like the broken teeth of a giant, with jagged peaks glowing with an inner fire. Sometimes, smoke would rise in clouds, bringing with it the smell of burning rock and sulfur. "Well," Labubu said softly, "that's either a warm welcome or a warning sign. Most likely both." They quickly packed up, taking only a water bottle, some dried berries, and the courage they had gained along the way. As they got closer to the cave entrance, the ground beneath their feet felt like a living drum beating under a thin crust. The tunnel quickly swallowed them in darkness. The walls were hot and sticky, and every time I exhaled, a hot gust came back. Spark moved forward, his tail tip glowing like a lantern. As they went deeper, the world became more focused on sound and touch. The hiss of moving air, the drip of condensed steam, and the soft crackle of fire that they couldn't see. A rhythmic thrum pulsed somewhere below, slow and steady, like a huge heart that was at rest. The narrow hallway opened up into a huge room after what felt like hours. The ceiling was high and curved, and the crystals on it burned in shades of copper and red. In the middle was a lake of molten rock, and the surface was bubbling and popping with sparks. Labubu stopped at the edge to protect its face from the heat. "Guess this is where someone comes out and explains the last test." A deep voice echoed through the room, as if it had been called, not from one direction, but from the stone itself. It said, "Guardian and Flame," in a voice that sounded like thunder. "You have gone beyond shadow and silence. You must now show that your bond is real. The Heartstone can only be awakened by trust that was made in fire." Spark was tense next to Labubu, with her wings half open. The stone columns that made up the ring round the lava lake started to shake. One by one, they broke open, letting streams of molten light flow out like flaming snakes. There was a sharp, electric tension in the air. A path of black basalt stones slowly rose from the lava, making a shaky bridge to a small island in the middle. There was a crystal shard on top of that island that looked like a heart and glowed with a soft green light. Labubu wiped a drop of sweat from its forehead. "Let me guess. We just walk across that and everything is fine, right?" The voice rumbled again. "You will only make it through the trial of fire if you work together. Doubt will hurt. Fear will go down. The only way is to trust." Some of the basalt stones hissed and steamed, and some of them sank back into the lava almost as soon as they appeared. Spark stared at Labubu with big eyes. Labubu said firmly, "Together. We've made it this far." They stepped on the first stone. It shook because of their weight, and the heat burned Labubu's feet. After that, Spark flew with his wings flicking to keep his balance. The next stone was too far away, so I had to jump. Labubu jumped and landed with a grunt. Spark flapped its tiny wings and then glided, its claws scraping the ground. A loud hiss came from the lava halfway through. Flames shot up on both sides, making walls of fire that reached high into the sky. The air shook, making the way ahead look strange. Labubu coughed because it was so hot. "Keep going." Spark made a noise, but there was doubt in its eyes. The next stone hung at a dangerous angle, and every time molten bubbles burst beneath it, it dipped. "Trust me," Labubu said as it crouched down and held out its arms. "Jump when I say." Spark steadied itself and stared at Labubu. 1, 2, now. Spark jumped. It hung above the glowing abyss for a heartbeat, its wings flapping wildly. Labubu grabbed the small body with its chest and jumped to the next stone. The basalt shook but stayed put. The lake of lava roared like it was angry. Dark shapes came out of the firewalls. They were dark reflections of Labubu and Spark. Their eyes shone like to fires. The Echo Labubu laughed. "Do you really think you can keep that dragon safe? You are just a trickster." The Echo Spark hissed, and flames licked at its jaws. "The Heartstone will kill you both." Labubu's heart raced. The shadows moved forward, and the bridge shook violently. Labubu said, mostly to himself, "They're illusions. They're just trying to break us. But what the shadow Labubu said hurt a lot. Old memories of pranks that went wrong, friendships that fell apart, and mistakes that weren't fixed came rushing back. What if they were correct? What if Labubu's nature was to run, laugh at the serious, and fail when it mattered most? Spark rubbed its nose against Labubu's chin, a simple gesture that showed faith without saying a word. That touch was so warm that it drowned out the sound of doubt. Labubu took a deep breath. "You don't define me," they said to the shadows. "We are who we say we are." Spark made a loud noise, and a burst of green flame shot out of its tiny mouth. The green fire spread over the bridge, turning the dark doubles into smoke that didn't hurt anyone. The way ahead became steadier. They all jumped over the last few stones and got to the central island. The Heartstone was waiting. It was a crystal heart that glowed with soft green and orange light, as if earth and fire had come together in one breath. Labubu walked up and touched its warm surface with his hand. Spark put its head on the crystal. There was a deep, resonant note in the cave. The Heartstone's light flared up, filling the room with a bright emerald gold light. The air was full of music, the soft whisper from the clock tower at night, the haunting flute from the hollow vale, and now a triumphant chorus of fire. The great voice spoke again, this time in a softer tone. "The bond has been shown to be real. You are whole, guardian and flame. You chose trust over fear and love over doubt, which is why the Heartstone wakes up." The lava lake calmed down, and the angry bubbles turned into a soft, glowing shimmer. The basalt bridge pulled back into the molten surface, as if it were bowing. Labubu could feel the Heartstone's warmth flow through their body, bringing them strength and peace. The scales on Spark's body glowed brighter than ever, with each facet showing a living flame. "Is it finished?" Labubu said something in a low voice. The voice said, "This is just the beginning." Then it faded away like the last note of a big song. "Take the tune to the world beyond. Your bond will be the light where the shadow rises." The room got darker, and all that was left was the natural glow of the crystals and the soft heartbeat of the Heartstone, which was now small and cool in Labubu's hand. They went back the way they came out of the cave, and the heat that had been so bad got better with each turn until the cool night air touched their skin. Stars outside sparkled like 1,000 promises. Spark jumped onto Labubu's shoulder and let out a happy rumble. Labubu smiled, a rare, quiet smile that didn't show any signs of trouble. They said softly, "We did it. We'll deal with whatever comes next together." A final, distant note echoed from deep inside the mountain. It was both a goodbye and a beginning. Labubu and Spark looked to the west, where the first light of morning was just beginning to touch the horizon. The Heartstone pulsed softly in Labubu's hand, reminding him of trust, friendship, and the journey still to come. Labubu and Spark came out of the Ember Caverns just as the first rays of dawn hit the faraway hills. The cool morning air felt like a blessing after the heat of the furnace. The Heartstone throbbed softly in Labubu's hand, and its soft green light matched the baby dragon's steady breathing. They walked through the quiet valley without saying a word, their footsteps crunching on the wet grass. Birds sang bright songs to greet the sunrise. For the first time in many nights, there were no whispers of warning or tests to pass. Only the calm rhythm of their journey home. Spark floated down to Labubu's shoulder, warm and light. A small flame flickered from its tiny mouth, more playful than fierce. Labubu laughed. "Looks like someone is hungry for breakfast." A golden beam from the east touched the Heartstone, and it hummed back softly. The clock tower night, the hollow bridge, and the firelit cavern all had melodies that came together to make a single pure note that hung in the air in the morning. Labubu felt it settle deep inside, not as a command, but as a promise. Their friendship was stronger than any quest. It would last longer than any shadow. "Home?" Labubu asked. Spark made a loud, bright trail. The Heartstone's light shone in the new day as they set off together toward the horizon. Two small travelers carrying a melody strong enough to light the world walked side by side, just where they belonged.